The relentless summer sun had baked the earth to a fine, suffocating dust for 3 straight months. And yet, there it was, the letter from the Westview Estates Homeowners Association on my doorstep, citing a negligent irrigation violation. Negligent? When I was barely trickling water just to keep the foundation of my historic farmhouse from cracking wide open. I crumpled the paper with a sound like dry leaves shattering, the acrid smell of burning rubber from the highway shimmering nearby almost drowning out my furious sigh. But the true gut punch arrived 48 hours later, delivered with the cold, calculated efficiency of a petty tyrant. The main water meter on my property line was padlocked, and a laminated note, scrawled in the aggressive, spiky handwriting of Homeowners Association President Karen, simply read, "No water for rule breakers. Conserve." I stared at the brass lock, feeling the dry heat of the afternoon sun blister the back of my neck. "Are they serious?" I muttered, my voice tight and raw. "They actually shut off my supply during a stage 3 drought? This wasn't conservation. This was a power trip, pure and simple." The next few days were a blur of escalating panic and fury. My small garden, the only thing connecting me to the land my grandfather built this house on, started to wilt dramatically. The prized heirloom tomatoes, which had survived decades, hung limp and yellow. The air in the house grew heavy and still, smelling faintly of stale drywall and desperation. I walked over to the HOA's community center to confront Karen, the queen of Westview, as I'd taken to calling her, but was met only by a locked door and a passive-aggressive sign saying, "HOA board meetings are by invitation only. Your concerns must be submitted in writing." Submitted in writing? I wanted to scream. My lifeblood has been cut off and she wants a memo? The injustice of it all settled deep in my bones. A cold, hard ache. It wasn't just the water. It was the utter disrespect, the arrogant assumption of control over something so fundamental. Who did she think she was? That night, lying awake and listening to the deafening silence of a dry neighborhood, save for the distant, smug burble of the little unnamed creek that bordered the entire estate on the far west side, an idea, dark and dangerous, began to form. It started as a faint whisper, growing into a thunderous roar. I knew that creek. Everyone in the development knew that creek. It was the natural source that fed the main Homeowners Association reservoir, which in turn kept Karen's massive, neon green lawn and the community's 2 ridiculously oversized swimming pools topped up. My property, unlike the cookie-cutter boxes in the rest of Westview, was old, bordering the wilder, undeveloped edge of the county, and my boundary line extended right up to the creek itself, covering a crucial, rocky 20-foot choke point just before the HOA's modern intake pipe. Wait a minute. I spent the next morning in the dusty, spider-webbed attic, the heat up there thick and suffocating, searching for the original 1948 deed and survey maps. The scent of aged, yellowed paper and cedar permeated the air. I finally found the rolled-up blueprint, the brittle paper crackling as I smoothed it out. My finger traced the boundary line, following the thin blue ink of the creek. Then I saw it, highlighted in faded red. The original riparian rights notation. Because my grandfather had owned the land first, before the development existed, the deed explicitly gave the owner primary control and usage rights of the water within the property boundary, provided it did not permanently alter the course of the waterway. It was a technicality the modern Homeowners Association lawyers, focused only on their shiny new covenants, had clearly overlooked. This isn't just some little boundary creek, Karen. This is legally mine for 300 feet. A slow, dangerous smile crept across my face. Oh, the sweet, sweet taste of legal leverage mixed with drought-induced rage. I worked under the cover of the next 3 nights. The first night, the moonlight was a sharp, unforgiving white, forcing me to use the deep shadows of the old oaks as cover. I didn't own a backhoe, but I owned grit and an old, heavy-duty hydraulic jack and some serious steel culverts I'd bought years ago for drainage repair and never used. The grating sound of the shovel hitting rock, the slow, agonizing pump of the jack, and the low, constant grunt of my own exertion were the only sounds. The damp smell of the creek clay mixed with my sweat. I wasn't diverting the creek permanently. I was simply installing a makeshift, gravity-fed bypass system, a silent temporary channel that redirected the majority of the water flow around the HOA's intake pipe and onto my own land, where it immediately soaked into the parched earth and flowed further down the undeveloped valley, away from Westview. The twist? I wasn't just hoarding it. I was ensuring it simply didn't reach their system, leaving the bare minimum to trickle into their intake. Justice, I decided, felt like the heavy weight of a steel shovel. The dawn of the fourth day was silent, unnaturally so. I stood by my padlocked meter, feeling the phantom ache in my muscles, and waited. The air was already thick with the coming heat. Then, the first complaint email hit the community forum. My sprinklers didn't turn on. Glitch. 10 minutes later, a cascade of panic. The community pool levels are dropping fast. Then came the sight I had waited for. Karen, in her pristine white tennis skirt, marching towards the creek intake. Her face an incredible shade of mottled red and disbelief. She saw the minimal trickle entering their pipe and then, her eyes widening in horror, she followed the new, tiny, but purposeful channel I had created. She stomped onto my lawn, practically spitting dust. "What in God's name have you done, you maniac?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with pure, unadulterated entitlement. "The water supply is failing. My lawn is going to die." I leaned against the oak tree, enjoying the sudden, cool breeze that seemed to follow the freshly moistened earth on my side of the line. "Oh, the consequences of rule-breaking, Karen? I wouldn't know." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy, broken only by a distant bird's chirping and her ragged breathing. "You cut off my water during a drought based on a bogus violation. Now, as the legal owner of this riparian boundary, I'm simply exercising my right to ensure the water flows naturally across my land first." Her jaw dropped. "You can't do this. We're all neighbors. And were we neighbors when you starved my garden?" I wondered, but said only, "You can put that concern in writing and submit it to the board, Karen. Maybe check your deed first." Within 48 hours, the Homeowners Association reservoir was critically low. No more pools, no more perpetually wet sidewalks, and Karen's lawn was starting to look the exact same shameful, patchy yellow as everyone else's. The emergency meeting they called was less a meeting and more a desperate plea, ending with an apologetic, defeated email sent to every resident, including me, confirming my grandfather's legal right and immediately rescinding my violation and restoring my water supply. The look on Karen's face when she watched the technician cut her padlock was priceless. A perfect blend of humiliation and impotent rage. True justice isn't about vengeance. It's about holding those in power accountable to the same rules they enforce on others. When she cut my water and left me dry, she forgot one crucial, cinematic truth. Never corner the person with the oldest deed and the biggest shovel. It was a bitter, costly lesson for Westview. But for me, it was the most satisfying sip of water I had ever tasted.